Reading Matthew 24, verse 42. It says, "You know not what hour the Lord comes. But know this, that if the good man of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched and would not have suffered his house to be broken into. Therefore be ye also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh. Who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his Lord hath made ruler over his household, to give him meat in due season? Blessed is that servant, whom his Lord, when he comes, will find so doing. Verily I say to you, that he shall make him ruler over all of his goods. And if that evil servant shall say in his heart, My Lord delayeth his coming, and shall begin to smite his fellow servants, and to eat and drink with the drunken, the Lord of that servant shall come in a day when he looketh not for him, and in an hour that he is not aware of, and shall cut him asunder, and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. And there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth." And I thought, when we want our lives to fall into place, when we want something to happen, maybe, for me, looking for maybe a new relationship, or looking for a new career opportunity or something like that, whatever it is, like, we all have something that's on our mind of what we're hoping will fall into place, and we're kind of crossing our fingers and saying, well, what should I do? And we're saying, will the hand of providence in some particular way give us a blessing in our life when we want it or when we need it? And we just don't necessarily know. Well, it's important to continue to have the attitude that blessings are going to come into your life, and be ready for them. I'll always remember somebody said a while ago, if you want a new relationship, then maybe you should clear out half of your closet. Because what if you were sharing your life with your significant other, and your closet is already full of all of your old clothes? Well, where's she going to put her stuff, right? So it's kind of like that, You want a new job? Well, then get up every day and act the same as you would if you had that job. Don't let yourself fall into a funk. Don't let yourself fall into a loop of discouragement. Don't say, oh, well, I don't have these certain blessings in my life. It's not really the way I want it to be. So I'm going to just, kind of give up and not, not be positive. I'm going to be, bitter. I'm going to be, maybe spiteful or something like that. It's important to be ready to receive blessings before they come, because if you're not ready, then when those blessings come, then, maybe they pass you by because you were busy saying, well, I don't have what I want. So, I guess it is what it is, Like this past week, I was thinking about, what can I do? I moved down to Arkansas, I get into my place, and, then I'm realizing, okay, well, now I'm looking for a job. Like, I need to find my next role that I'm going to have, that next opportunity. And I don't necessarily know what it is, right? And so going through that, but then I was also thinking, what can I do? I can unpack my stuff. I can get the photos, on the wall and get my office set up the way I want. I can, do all of those things, like going to the DMV and getting my new driver's license, and just doing all those little errands and housekeeping kind of things that if I was working, I might not have as much time or energy to do those things. So I try to take that time and use the downtime as an opportunity to get my house in order, because sometimes if you get your house in order, then you're in a better position when maybe you have something else that comes up. Like, what if you're not seeing anybody, right? And then you think, well, I would like to start dating or something, right? And then all right, so you meet this woman, and then you bring her over to check out your place, and you got your underwear all over the floor and a bunch of boxes that you didn't pack from when you moved. And like your whole life is this billboard advertising that you are in a state of complete disarray. Well, what kind of impression does that send? These are the kinds of things where the more uncertainty we have, the more important it is for us to remember the universe is friendly and life is filled with blessings. And the fact that maybe something hasn't quite fallen into place yet shouldn't be cause for despondence. It should be cause for spiritual preparation for that which is to come. And I do believe that if we project a positive vibe out there into the universe, if we have that belief that all things work together for good, if we have the belief that when the right time comes, opportunities will fall into place, it has a way of just being this uplifting force. And you can say it's some sort of magic, if you will. But I really do believe that if you focus on good things, if you focus on, positive things, if you focus on a spirit of receiving blessings, you're more likely to get them, and you're more likely to get them at the right time. But often when we don't get what we want in the time that we want it, then we start to have that attitude that we've been done wrong, and we start to be bitter, and we start to be frustrated, and we start to have these self-limiting feelings that pour in. And then we're less likely to actually get what we want, what we really need, because we have gone too far down the path of bitterness, of frustration, of resentment, of being, if you will, angry at God for not fulfilling our expectations in our time. Faith is about just going out there and not knowing, but believing that even in the absence of sight, there can still be hope. The Bible does say that Jesus is the author and finisher of our faith. And I think that's a interesting and poetic way to describe man's relationship with God. Faith is about understanding that there is an author, which is greater than any person, which has created a story that makes sense, even if we don't understand each individual part of it that we play. And, whether you're a person of faith or you're a religious person or you're not, like it really doesn't matter. We're all part of a story that's written in the stars. We're all connected. And it's completely plausible that even if things don't necessarily make sense now, they will make more sense if we have faith to trust that we don't necessarily have to be in control of everything every step of the way. When you think that everything in life is, your job to sort out, figure out, that can be a really heavy burden to bear. But then I look at my life and I think about how most of the big events in my life weren't really things that I tried really hard to do. It wasn't this enormous amount of striving that led me to the places where I've gone in life. It was more following a path than it was really doing all of it myself. And I think that we are on a path that we're guided to walk. The crazy thing about it, though, is that sometimes the path is far more winding than what we would have expected it to be. It's just like the children of Israel in the Bible. They're making their way to the promised land. And I don't know how big of a geography they were traversing, but they took 40 years to go from Egypt to the promised land. And when you think about how long 40 years is, it really was such a long journey. It wasn't even for them. It was for their children probably, right? Because by the time they got there, if they even lived to get there, they were probably old, right? But the craziest thing about this story is that it wasn't a 40-year journey. It shouldn't have been. Geographically, the travel of the Jews from Egypt to the promised land was, I don't know, probably like the equivalent of less than a day's drive by car if this was modern day, right? So they were in a very small area. They were kind of going in circles, I would assume. Essentially, they were nomadic for quite some time. That's really what it was. It wasn't that they were super far away from the promised land. It was maybe that they were lost and they had to find themselves along the way. Whatever it was, though, it's a great allegory of the fact that sometimes we have to go a long distance to go a short way. And sometimes we resent that because we think we just want to get all of the pieces put together and say, well, why don't we just get it all settled? I could look at my last marriage and say, well, that didn't work out. And how do I unpack that? Well, I'm sure I can infer some lessons that I learned. I can look at things I would have done different if I could go back in time, but you can't. But I would also look at that and say, maybe the entire purpose of that experience was for personal growth, right? It was a chance for me to learn some lessons I needed to learn. Or maybe for my ex-wife to learn lessons from it that she needed to learn in her path. See, like we could look at these things and say, well, it's a tragedy, but maybe it wasn't an accident. Maybe it was a lesson. And that's a really hard thing to learn. Sometimes in life, the things that we think are the final step in the journey are actually just a stepping stone. A lesson along the way that leads us toward the place where we'll end up. And that's a hard, tough pill to swallow. Like if you were 18 years old and I say to you, you're going to spend 15 years of your life learning lessons and experiencing disappointments and setbacks, and you're not going to make a lot of progress, so that you can get to a place where you're going to be able to begin the actual thing that you're going to do with your life. Like, you would look at me and be like, oh, well, that sucks. I know that's not the message I want to hear, right? But is it possible? Yeah. I mean, it is, right? You know, like I work for Walmart, and I look at the story of Sam Walton. And Sam Walton started off making this company. He opened this store that would become Walmart, and he did it, you know, when he was in his 40s, right? So, you know, you think about this, and you think about, you know, how easy it is. You write yourself off, or you think, you know, I'm out of time and I can't reclaim these lost years and things like that. But then there's many times where the greatest work of a person's life winds up being in the middle or the later part of their life too, right? But we can't necessarily rush God's timing. We have to be good stewards of what we have in the moment that we have, which is right now. But sometimes the journey is meant to be longer, and the bearing of fruit is meant to be later. And we have to learn in that space stewardship and patience. I was listening to the audio book of Patrick Stewart, who was Jean-Luc Picard, the famous captain of the Enterprise D in Star Trek: The Next Generation. And, you know, he was, I believe, 46 years old when he first got an interview to become an actor for Star Trek. And initially, he got rejected for it. And then it wound up being the most influential thing he would ever do in his life. But all of that happened after he went through a funk of feeling like his best days were behind him. And he was just this washed out actor who did Shakespeare plays. And he didn't see a bright future at that particular moment. And then the call came, and he changed so many people's lives, mine included, with this amazing part he played in television show that would inspire people to have a character that they admired. Everyone knows who he is. He left a mark on popular culture and history, and it's pretty incredible. But it didn't happen till sometime in his 40s, right? Patrick Stewart also married a woman, and he had kids, and it was a 20-year marriage, and then it failed. Why? It failed because of differences in perspective, differences in career path. They just drifted apart. And then he would wind up marrying another one or two women, I believe, and they didn't work out. And he writes in his book about how, you know, he felt like that was the biggest regret of his life, that he'd screwed up every relationship that he'd ever had. And he resolved to be a better man. And then he met a woman, I believe when he was 70, he met a woman who was much younger than himself. And he married her, and they had the best married life of his entire life. And I believe to this day, as I make this video, they're still happily married. And he talks about how that felt like, you know, kind of a opportunity for redemption. Because finally, even if it was at the end of his life and it was the last chapter of his life, the last chapter was the best chapter. And, you know, what an amazing book it was. And I would definitely recommend it. I believe it's called Making It So, a book by Patrick Stewart. If you're a Star Trek fan, definitely worth giving it a read or a listen on Audible. But, you know, it's just an amazing story of, you know, not a perfect man, but a good man. And not a perfect journey, but a journey that led somewhere meaningful, even if it meant going there in ways that didn't necessarily make sense. So to close this out, I would just say it all adds up to the importance of faith in our life. Have faith, because when you have faith, even when you don't see the results you're looking for, then you can live your life with the attitude that you already have those things. And you can be grateful for even the setbacks in life, because sometimes they are the best investment in putting you on the right trajectory to learn lessons you need to learn when you need to learn them, and put you in a place where you're going to be able to come out in a better position down the road. Always be grateful for the life that you have, and focus on meditating on good things in life instead of lamenting things that are wrong. One thing I've noticed a lot is that the internet is filled with negativity. It's filled with political stuff. It's filled with people raging about what's broken or what's wrong or any number of things like that. And when you disconnect from all of that stuff, it's a lot easier to get to a place where life doesn't feel like it's actually all that bad at all. It's a pretty problem-free thing when you stop consuming all of the doom and the gloom and the conspiracy theories and the crazy stuff about how the world is going to end and how everything's broken. And, you know, like, go spend a day on Reddit and you would think that there's something wrong everywhere. Go out into real life and you might find it's far less gloomy. I subscribe to a Reddit about Bentonville, Arkansas, because I moved there, and you know what people are doing? Like, they're complaining about what's going on with a bike mural at the city council, and they're complaining about, you know, I don't know, somebody thought they saw a stalker on a trail, like whatever. Like, you read about stuff on Reddit and you would think this is probably not a very nice place, but go out there and experience a day on the streets and, you know, you're probably not going to experience any problems. You know, we look and we say, well, this particular area is red or it's blue politically or whatever. But the reality is 90% of the people that are there are just trying to live their lives, just trying to find their way. They're just trying to enjoy the days they have on this earth. See, it's when you go onto the, you know, go into the echo chambers of silos online and places which just feed off of negative energy that you start to have this attitude that things are broken. Same thing in gaming. You could play a game and you could think this is a cool game until you go onto YouTube and look at reviews and you see all the people complaining about how it's a broken game or it sucks or the latest update wasn't good or whatever it might be, you know. And you know, you just start to realize that it's not necessary to live a life that's filled with negativity, because it's also completely possible to live a life that's based on love. So choose that, be a good steward, and have faith even if you don't have sight, and trust that the author and finisher of our faith, God, whomever you see God to be, well, will direct our paths, and then let it go, because Life is too beautiful to spend it on things which do not edify the spirit. As always, good luck on your adventures. Till next time. Thanks so much.